Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone here tonight and thank you for being here. Exactly 250 years ago on this day, 4 days after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, this extraordinary document was read aloud for the first time. Not only are we continuing America's democratic experiment 250 years later, but we are also joining in a simultaneous reading of the Declaration of Independence across all 50 states, 5 inhabited territories, and 15 countries. That is worthy of applause. This is a powerful demonstration of community and democracy. That this reading is taking place at the heart of our campus, a place where ideas are formed and debated, mirrors the revolutionary spirit of our nation's founders. While I love to say, forever go blue, it seems appropriate this evening that I say, forever go red, white, and blue. We will begin reading in a moment, but first, please join me in welcoming Paul Erickson, the director of the Clements Library.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm the director of the Clements Library, which is right over on South University Avenue. It's one of the best places in the world to study the history of the American Revolution, so this is a busy time for us. All of us here know the anniversary that just happened on Saturday, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We're used to thinking of that as a beginning, the start of what becomes the United States. But it was also an end. For the colonists who lived in Britain's North American colonies, it was the end to a relationship that had been going downhill for a long time, and in April of 1775 had turned into open war at Lexington and Concord. This was a difficult thing for the colonists to deal with since they thought of themselves as British subjects. In October of 1776, King George III gave an address to Parliament where he declared the North American colonies out of his protection. This essentially meant that he kicked them out of the British Empire and he wouldn't protect them if anybody tried to invade. It also dissolved all of the colonial governments in the 13 colonies. This was an emergency for the leaders of the colonies because they felt themselves adrift. They felt like they had independence thrust on them before they were ready. So over the winter, members of the Continental Congress, especially John Adams and Richard Henry Lee, talked about what they needed to do that coming spring. And at the top of their list was the idea of declaring independence. On June 7th of 1776, Richard Henry Lee addressed the Continental Congress and put forward a motion to declare independence. It was clear that the motion would probably pass, but it wouldn't be unanimous. So the Congress decided to table it for a month until early July and appointed a committee of 5 members to write a Declaration of Independence. As most of you know, Thomas Jefferson was appointed the chief writer by that committee. He was 33 years old, one of the youngest members of the Continental Congress, and he wrote it at night because the Congress was still meeting during the day. So he was working on a term paper that was due in 3 weeks. On June 28th, the committee presented that draft declaration to the Congress. They did not like it. They said, go back to the drawing board, make some changes. We're going to vote to declare independence on July 2nd, which they did. And over the next 2 days, Jefferson wrote frantically along in partnership with members of the Continental Congress to make changes that resulted in the version of the Declaration that we are going to read today. We read the Declaration as part of our history, and it is one of our founding documents. But it's also a reminder of what our nation might become someday in the future. Most of the Declaration is a list of grievances. It's a list of complaints from the colonists about what the British government had done wrong. But each of those grievances has an implicit aspiration for what a good government might do. And so when you listen to the grievances that people are going to read today, think about what the flip side of that would be. What does what might a good government do instead of what Britain had done. There are some of these grievances that are hard to hear today. Some of them have some difficult language, but that's part of our history as well. And it's important that we reckon with that as a country and think about how that can inspire us to do better in the future. So I will turn things over to President Grasso, who will begin the reading of the Declaration. And it's important to keep in mind that this is the way that most colonists would have experienced the Declaration in 1776. Some of them might have read it in a newspaper, but most people heard it read out loud in public by their neighbors. So enjoy.
Thank you, Paul. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them they shall most likely affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governor to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operations till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attain them.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation.
For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment from any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses.
For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation.
He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become their executioner of their friends and brethren, or to fall on themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has been able to bring inhibits of their frontliners to the Indian savages, for who knows the rule of welfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we've conjured them by ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would have inevitably interrupted our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity, which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly and publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance from the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Thank you to all of our readers. Thanks to all of you for coming. I want to introduce Brad Phillips, who is playing over here. For more than 15 years, Brad has served as a sideman for some of Michigan's most popular singer-songwriter acts. He is best known for his appearances with Jeff Daniels, the Verve Pipe, and the Celtic fusion supergroup Milish. He's also appeared with May Erlewine, Joshua Davis, and played violin for Stevie Wonder, Aretha Franklin, Pat Metheny, and Iggy Pop and the Stooges. That's an impressive CV. Brad received both his bachelor's and master's degrees in music from the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance, where he now serves as a resident artist in the Chamber Music Department. Brad is also a resident artist at the Purple Rose Theater Company, where he has worked as a composer, sound designer, and actor. His solo show is an eclectic retrospective of his life in the arts as a sideman, while exploring his own creative voice with original instruments and songs, which delve deeply into his rich and diverse history in the music scene at home in Michigan, across the country, and abroad. So please stick around and enjoy the music.